Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Ah, ah. Now, Roland the Roadie was only a toady who carried the mics and the lights for the show. And Gertrude the Groupie was a rock and roll fan who stood by the stage door in the rains and the snow.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where you can't spell demonetization without demonization. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. I am your co-host and humble servant. And here is your Decline of Western Civilization news roundup for the third week of September 2023. Dateline, Washington, Monday, 18 September. Majority Leader Crying Chuck Schumer announced that the United States Senate will henceforth have no dress code whatsoever, not even an informal one. Why? Well, because Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, the second most famous man in D.C. who can't string a coherent sentence together, well, he just wants to be comfy. He doesn't think he should have to be bothered putting on a suit and tie to represent the people of his state in the Senate chamber, and so henceforth, he's just going to come to work dressed like your average homeless man in a hoodie and gym shorts. Presumably, the coming weeks will see Fetterman given even further special dispensations to do things that he also enjoys doing at home, like scratching his balls, belching the names of his favorite cartoon characters, and crushing beer cans against his head. Dateline, Washington, Tuesday, 19 September. According to a new survey from Pew Research Center, 55% of registered Democrats say that having fewer children produces, quote, a positive impact on the environment. Remarkably, 28% of Republicans hold that same view, as do 41% of U.S. adults overall, because I can't tell you how many times I have walked through a cemetery and seen gravestone after gravestone that read, I'm sure glad I spent my childbearing years having random meaningless hookups with people whose names I don't even remember, if I even knew them in the first place. And I go now to my eternal rest, knowing that dying bitter, lonely, and miserable was a small price to pay, so that the global mean temperature might hypothetically drop by some small fraction of 1 degree 100 years after I am dead. Dateline, Seattle, Wednesday, 20 September. 3 years after its infamous Summer of Love, in which the city council slashed funding for the police department by a full 50%, then declared all public drug use and possession decriminalized, and looked on with chest swelling pride as armed Marxist revolutionaries lovingly took over most of the city center, declared a heroin dealing amateur hip hop artist the mayor, and issued desperate pleas for soy and cigarettes within 24 hours of declaring their independence. The Seattle City Council, in a shocking reversal, passed a resolution saying, okay, now that our entire city looks like a burned out hellscape of misery, despair, and human suffering, maybe we should start prosecuting people who openly sell narcotics and shoot up in the middle of the goddamn sidewalk. Now, if only we had some cops to enforce that policy. Governance sure is hard. Dateline Ottawa, Thursday, 21 September. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, bit of a Freudian slip there, is under fire for his relentless, some might say maniacal, support for something called the 2S LGBTQI plus community, with thousands of Canadians taking to the streets to express their outrage over the Prime Minister and his government seemingly having no other educational priorities except to teach kids that declaring yourself a member of some fictional made-up gender and having as much freaky non-normative sex as possible are the only things you need to do in order to be a good, upstanding Canadian. Some might say that the sight of homosexuals and Muslims marching together in solidarity with each other against the agenda of his limitless, unbridled celebration of sex perversion would be enough to make Mr. Trudeau reconsider his present policy course, but we can't say for sure, as the Prime Minister slathered himself in blackface and slipped out the back door in order to avoid having to answer the question. Dateline, Springfield, Illinois, Friday, 22 September. Illinois governor and beach ball-shaped lunatic J.B. Pritzker affixed his signature to a piece of legislation that makes Illinois the first state in the union to eliminate all cash bail for all offenses. Asked by reporters how this will make the people of Illinois safer, Pritzker said, "Cash bail is racist." Pressed further to explain how turning violent criminals loose on the streets will make the society less racist, Pritzker replied, "Did I stutter? I said cash bail is racist. So obviously, if you ask me why cash bail is racist, then you are part of the white supremacist patriarchy, as opposed to me, the white male billionaire who is shaped like a beach ball. And besides, cash bail is racist is the only thing it says on the talking points memo I was just handed, so I don't know what the hell else I'm supposed to say, except that I would really like a box of jelly donuts." And that's the decline of Western civilization news update for the week of 18 September 2023. Back to you, Squatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
I found a flaw in my plan.
Did you?
Yeah. It doesn't let me change around this part while I'm in one of those transition things. So I have to do it real quick while we're I know how to do it now, and I know how not to let that happen.
I didn't know you were coming straight to me out of the intro sequence.
It seemed organic, but I like making people uncomfortable. How are we doing today? Welcome to the Blast Radius, where we're just going to kind of sit around and drop opinion bombs that are probably highly controversial and extremely unpopular.
One would hope.
Let's do this, right? And then we're going to do this thing over here. I got to fix this. What am I fixing? Okay, let's undo that. Right? What was the next step? The next step was
I've got this day in history I can do.
Okay. All right. Let me get that set up correctly, because it's supposed to be. No, that's not right. We're going to make this all much smoother, I promise.
We're professionals, ladies and gentlemen.
You really can't do this until you're actually doing it. So, we learn. We're going to pull that up like so. And We're going to add the gold tunnel effect. See, that wasn't supposed to come down yet. That's where I went wrong. Right? All right. So that's straight. We'll fix that again in a minute. And then we put this up. We do this thing, and then we do this thing, and it's all yours, bud.
It's not that time yet, though.
What did I miss? Damn it.
That's not until I get to my main segment.
Okay.
You can play whatever you want during this day in history. This day in history is only supposed to be 1 minute long, right?
Right. Okay.
But I mean, you can leave that up while I do it. That's fine. Let's just go with it.
Okay.
This day in history. 1789, the United States Congress passes the Judiciary Act, creating the Office of Attorney General. Thanks, guys. And establishing the number of seats on the Supreme Court. 1890. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as a condition of Utah statehood, officially renounces the institution of plural marriage. 1929, American hero and certified stone-cold badass James H. Doolittle completes the first takeoff, flight, and landing in an aircraft with no windows and no means of external visual reference, proving for the first time that airplanes can, in fact, be flown on instruments alone. 1957, President Dwight Eisenhower, in what was probably a fairly flagrant violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, sends the 101st Airborne Division into Little Rock, Arkansas to enforce the desegregation of that city's public schools. 1960, USS Enterprise, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and the 8th vessel to carry that most distinguished moniker, is launched. 2005, Hurricane Rita makes landfall in the United States, causing widespread devastation in portions of southwestern Louisiana and southwest Texas. 2014, India becomes the first nation to not have its first Mars mission end in spectacular failure, as the Mars Orbiter mission, just like the name says, successfully enters orbit around the red planet. And that's this day in history. Back to you, Squatch.
Magnificent, my brother. Let me tell you, when you get to see the fact that the Earth is round from space, that seems pretty special to me. It's not anything that anyone else in history has been able to say they could do, you know. Mm-hmm. Or if you prefer, if you like to see astronauts practicing underwater, that is also an option.
That is an option. Which they still do right up to the present day. And
Absolutely.
you know whose idea that was?
Which one?
Buzz Aldrin.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good idea. It was a good one. It's special.
Yep.
I remember what it was I was going to do as my little bit. I was going to go off about beavers for a little while, but it's a totally innocuous and stupid thing, and we can skip it. All right, so your main bit, what you're planning on doing with your main bit is, all right, I have some videos that I have put aside for the later part of this, right?
Well, let's do something of yours right now.
Okay, we can do that. And we will do it this here way, where I'm gonna go skadoosh. I'm gonna go skadoosh. Gonna go. So how do you feel about the concept of social constructs? Do you believe in this term at all? The social construct of things?
Well, yes, because the things that the establishment tells us are social constructs almost always are not, and the opposite is also true.
Right. Usually they're just a byproduct of the functionality of the world and has nothing to do with anything systemic or any of those other buzzwords that you hear. So this is Simon Webb. You might remember him as such hot takes as your history textbook from when you were in school. He was probably cited in your sociology, your social studies, your history textbooks, these types of things. He wrote all sorts of like textbooky things. I mean, he's in all of them. And this gentleman has an opinion. And I think when someone's been writing history for the world for the past 50 years, his opinion might matter. But that's just my opinion. What do I know?
One of the most
Try that again.
Hello again. One of the most significant achievements in the last few decades of those adhering to left-wing ideology is to make the idea of human races thoroughly disreputable. The phrase race is a social construct, as neat a piece of Marxist rhetoric as one could hope to find, has been repeated over and over again until it has become axiomatic, and anybody questioning the idea is denounced as either a fool or a rogue. However, telling the same falsehood over and over again does not ultimately make it any more true than it was the first time it was uttered. Let me explain what I mean. Although there are indeed no pure races in the senses that 19th century ideologues use the term, that doesn't mean that there are no inherent or biological differences between a black person from Nigeria and a white man from Britain. This idea that all differences are purely environmental and associated with upbringing and culture lies at the heart of the idea that race is a social construct. Let's see how this lie became part of mainstream discourse in Britain and the United States.
Do you have any particular disagreements so far?
Nope.
Once upon a time, it was believed that there were half a dozen subspecies of humans arranged in a hierarchy. Those belonging to one of these races, as they were called, all shared certain characteristics and were limited by their biology. Chinese people were cunning and cruel, black people primitive and dull-witted, white people noble and intellectual, and so on. We know without a shadow of a doubt that this facile biological determinism is false. The fact that we meet stupid white people, black intellectuals, or kind but dim-witted Chinese people means that there must be more to the case than this simple view. There is more to it than that. Whatever the situation might have been in the distant past, today we are almost all of us mongrels with mixed genes and ancestry. African Americans, for instance, have an average of 24% white European DNA and a dash of Native American as well. The situation is even more complicated than that because the 75% of sub-Saharan African DNA is also a hopeless jumble of different ethnic groups or races. Africa was once populated by the Khoisan, once known as Bushmen, together with Pygmies in Central Africa. Then the Bantus, those whom we would regard today as typical black Africans, spread out from their homeland in West Africa and colonized the continent, killing off or enslaving the Khoisan and Pygmies. However, they also interbred with them, absorbing many of their genes. When we look at a famous black person like Nelson Mandela, we can see at once his skin is a lot lighter than the average Nigerian, say, and his facial features are also different. This is because he was largely of Khoisan ancestry. This same process of jumbling up ethnic groups happened in Europe as well, and also in Asia. Whatever pure racial groups once existed, wherever they were, it's no longer the case. However, this doesn't mean that all inherent and genetic differences between black people and white, and also between them and the populations in East Asia, have vanished. They have not. And black people differ in many ways from white people, but these differences are by percentage and proportion. They're not absolutes. In other words, we can talk about white people being a greater likelihood to have such and such a character, or black people being more probable to be so and so, or those from.
So have we gotten into the realm of stereotypes now? Is that what he's talking about? You know, because
Probably.
really, really careful treading over here. Is that what we're doing? Because it's a touchy subject that everybody wants to get real upset about. This gentleman,
Tiptoeing around the thing you're not supposed to talk about.
right? Well, this gentleman, see, he put on his shit stomping boots this morning and decided to go make a mud pie. I love it.
East Asia having a higher proportion of such and such. That's because the races are jumbled up. There aren't any pure races at all. There are merely ethnic groups. I want to mention.
Pretty sure he was chewing his tongue off right there.
Well, he ain't wrong.
No, he's not. He's not. You would be hard pressed to find anywhere in the world other than possibly, and I mean maybe, North Sentinelese Island that doesn't have at least some sort of miscegenation in their heritage.
And nearly everybody today uses the terms race and ethnicity interchangeably, and they are not interchangeable terms.
They don't even have the same meaning at all.
Nope.
I mean, an ethnicity is more likely to be of a specific race, but is not necessarily of that race. And a race is most likely of a certain or group of ethnicities, but not necessarily.
A little bit about some of the inherent ways in which black people differ from white people. I've mentioned one of these many times, which is that black children tend to stand and walk at an earlier age than white babies. This is cross-cultural and has nothing to do with culture, nationality, or environment. It's the same in a British city as on a Caribbean farm. It's observed in America as it is in Kenya. It is an inbuilt difference between black people and white people. As usual, in the description to this video, I give links to academic papers on the matters about which I am talking. What other differences are there between black people?
All right, Tiger Man gets the participation trophy of the day.
We have a gold star for him.
Absolutely, you get a trophy. You get a gold star, bud. Good job. And for the record, one of my daughters is Afghani or half Afghani or something like that. Whatever race would that be? Whatever. I don't distinguish amongst them like that.
Well, the Afghans are, if you want to be technical, a Caucasian people.
True, but you try telling her
because the Caucasus Mountains are, you tell me where the Caucasus Mountains are.
She refers to me as you people because she gets a better tan than I do. But she can't tan at night the way I can.
And if we want to talk about Americans, anybody whose forebears were on this continent, half a dozen generations ago, pretty much everybody has white blood and black blood and Native American blood. And that's just all there is to it. And the DNA test will bear that out. In
almost every case, it's very rare to come across somebody who is in fact, I would say impossible in America, being, what was it we used to call it, the great melting pot?
Because what is the first thing that happens when two groups of people come into contact with each other? They start having sex and making babies. If there is any hard and fast truth about human civilization, it is that.
Absolutely. I mean, take the very first encounter with the island of Fiji. Are you familiar with the history on that one?
Sure.
You are or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they show up. There's a freaking mutiny. The mutineers are put off the ship where they are kept in the lap of luxury by beautiful Fijian maidens, where they are brought mixed drinks and coconuts all day long on the beach and not allowed to wander around alone without a whole flock of beautiful young Fiji women. And the people on the ship were like, that does not look like punishment. And there was another mutiny.
Well, and you could also be talking about the mutiny on the Bounty, which is exactly the same story.
Yeah, no, it happens over and over again. It doesn't matter if it's good people, bad people, white people, black people, light people, dark people, clay people, sand people, does not matter. If you mix two people together, these two people are immediately going to hit it off like gangbusters in the sack. All right, let's wrap this one up.
people and white. The age at the onset of puberty is one. It happens to be earlier in black children than it is in white ones. This may be connected with the fact that black adolescents tend to have higher levels of testosterone than white teenagers and young people. Puberty strikes about a year earlier for black people. The question of extra testosterone is an interesting one too, for several reasons. I'm sure that viewers know that black Americans have the highest levels of cancer of the prostate in the whole world, and this is due to having higher levels of circulating testosterone. I again give details of papers about this subject in the description to this video. Testosterone is associated with athletic success and is important in things like running, football, and boxing. Is there a connection with what is seen in sports in this country? Is that too anything to do with the ability to walk and run at an earlier age than the general population? Is that why black people are prominent in sport? Then too, there is the question of academic underachievement, which is sometimes attributed to black people having lower IQs on average than white people. Perhaps there is another explanation which might shed light too on the disproportionate number of black people who are the victims or perpetrators of violent crime in Britain and the United States, including homicide. As well as being able to explain the prowess of black people on the running track and sports field. High levels of testosterone are found not only in those who excel in some sports, but also among violent criminals in prison. Those who have faced disciplinary action in prison for clashing aggressively with warders are found to have higher levels of testosterone than usually expected. How might this affect educational attainment? It does appear that black school pupils are at an increased risk of failing at school as they become teenagers. At least part of the answer might lie in biological factors. Being able to stand, walk, run and jump at an earlier age than other ethnic groups might, together with having many role models who are footballers, boxers and athletes, give black children a greater propensity for moving about vigorously. And this in turn could lead to their being less keen on sitting quietly on chairs for an hour or so at a time. It's easy to see that the result could be fidgeting and getting up and walking around when the rest of the class is supposed to be sitting down and working on some uninspiring academic task. Such conduct could lead to teachers regarding the children involved as being disruptive or disobedient. And it's a known fact that black children are more likely to be excluded than white children from school. It could also lead to lower examination pass rates. The idea that all racial and ethnic differences are merely social constructs, an optical illusion if you like, is absurd. There are very real differences between black people and white, and all the evidence suggests that at least some of these differences are genetic. That is to say, nothing to do with culture, upbringing, or anything else. The implication for the absorption of large numbers of people from sub-Saharan Africa into European countries may be profound.
January 6th.
That's later. We're not doing that yet. I did the wrong button first. I need to do the right buttons in the right order. All right, bud. So
Wait,
the next,
go ahead.
the next thing is that thing, right?
Sure, we can do World War II now. I'm always up for some World War II, baby.
Me too, bro. There's supposed to be 2 minutes of banter, so immediately start bantering.
I am going to add to what was just said by, you have to introduce some sort of social factors here, because disrespecting any issues of race or genetics or whatever you want to call it, if one kid with a certain testosterone level becomes a superstar in sports and another kid with the same testosterone level becomes a violent criminal, I would be willing to bet there is an incredibly overwhelming chance that the one kid had a father and the one kid didn't, because
Yeah.
fatherlessness is an incredibly important factor in our society today, and one of the things that is wrecking our social cohesion, because it just gets worse and worse and worse in
Right.
every demographic.
You're right. You're right. See, that's one of the things when I say upset. I don't really get upset about it because people only know what they're told. So the fact that people don't know this kind of perturbs me a little bit. But if you take race out of the equation and just look at the distinction of individuals based on, say, earnings, you find that almost all of your crime that is violent crime falls below a certain earning bracket. If you cross references along the lines of, say, the type of house someone lives in, whether it's in a trailer park or they own their own home or whatever, you will find your crime statistics laid out in a nice little graph on earning potentials and whatnot. That cross reference is very nice with crime, especially violent crime. But then when you put it into a racial context, you do tend to find the same types of people in those types of tax brackets, and those types of activities often lead to them staying in the impoverished tax brackets.
And the one thing that cuts across every demographic factor is that kids who grew up with a mother and a father who were married to each other do drastically better than kids that didn't.
And it doesn't matter what race, what religion, what state, what environment they grow up in. They can be as impoverished as any poor person out there. And
whether it's a trailer park or a mansion,
a supportive father and a supportive mother, or actually that's not even really all that much calculated into the statistics. Just simply having them there seems to make a huge difference, whether they're good, bad, crappy, excellent, whatever.
And we're in a society now that is pretty much trying to dispense with the nuclear family, even saying the nuclear family is not just irrelevant, but even in some cases a bad thing. And that is madness. I mean, if you want to destroy your society, that's the best way to do it, is by saying the nuclear family doesn't matter and it doesn't make a whit of difference whether kids have a mother and a father and whether the mother and father are married to each other. That is madness. It's just madness.
It is literal insanity to expect yourself to raise scholars while taking every form of morality out of schools.
And it bothers me that we so often hear single motherhood praised as something morally praiseworthy. Like, oh, my mom was a single mom and she had to work this many jobs, but that's a bad thing. That's not a good. If you succeeded and your mom was a single mom working you succeeded in spite of that and not because of it. And your mother shouldn't be praised for getting into a bad marriage. I'm sorry, she just shouldn't.
I don't really. Okay, all the respect in the world to those women that were capable of single-handedly raising their children without the help of the father. I infinite respect for these individuals. Same's true for fathers, though. Single fathers do it every day too. And what you'll find if you look at the statistics behind it, people who had single fathers, especially if you have like more than one child, I don't know why this stat matters, but it seems to. Single children with a single father have a little bit of a bent towards psychopathy and unhealthy relationships and stuff. Whereas groups of children, multiple siblings with a single father, quite often excel more than your fatherless households, but below the threshold of your mother and father households. And that is strictly a nurture thing. There is no genetic or predisposition involved in such a sample size.
Yeah, and you just can't make a racial or even an economic issue out of the fact that kids with a mother and a father who are married to each other simply do better than kids that don't have that. And like I said, it cuts across every single socioeconomic factor that there is. It's a razor that slices through everything.
Absolutely everything, every statistic, every gradient that we measure by. lower suicide rates, higher earning potentials, more stable relationships in adulthood, better starting job, which is a kind of a funny thing because they don't just have higher earning potential throughout their life. They also start typically in a higher paying position than people without a functional family. Your higher support matrix lends itself towards a much more grounded and pardon the expression, but based view towards the world. And in general, while they might be a hair more violent, they're typically much more chill. It's just that when they become violent, it's really, really violent because you've done something to tick them over.
Well, and kids that show violent predilections are the kids who most need a father to kick their ass. Not necessarily kick it physically, but a father needs to be able to inspire fear in a child, especially a male child.
Should experience fear. If not, from
your
father figure.
You need to have a father who says, if you do that shit again, then we're going to have a problem. And it doesn't need to go beyond that. Because a father should be able to inspire the necessary amount of fear just with that statement.
All right. I think we did pretty good with that. So we're going to try us another transition and see how this works. Wait, we're going to pretend like I didn't already transition.
Tactical nuke incoming!
And we got to get us another clip there. We got to get something else, dude. We'll figure it.
Tactical nuke incoming.
I love it. Okay. World War II. Hit it.
Now, we spoke briefly last week about the Battle of Midway and what a strategic hinge point that was in terms of World War II in the Pacific. But the European War, I think, also has a similar strategic hinge point. And to set up the scene, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. Germany invades Poland on the 1st of September, 1939. It takes them about a month to subdue Poland. Poland does pretty well for itself, for a country that still has horse cavalry and no tanks. They did all right, but they got subdued because, of course, they did. So Poland's off the map. Poland is absorbed into Germany. And then for the next 8 months of the war, even though Britain and France have declared war on Germany and vice versa, there's not a whole hell of a lot that happens. The only thing that happens during that period is the Norway campaign, because the Allies and Germany both wanted Norway because they both needed the iron ore that was coming out of Sweden. And the only way to get the iron ore out of Sweden the whole year round is through the Norwegian port of Narvik, because that's the port that is ice-free the whole year round. And so Britain was planning to invade Norway, and the Germans knew they were planning to invade Norway, and so the Germans invaded first, and they got a hold of Norway. And that's when the Norway campaign goes so badly for the British that's when the House of Commons finally loses confidence in the leadership of Neville Chamberlain and decides, you know what? We probably need to change prime ministers here. And that's when Churchill's premiership starts. I think a lot of people think that it was the start of the war that caused Churchill coming into the top spot, but it wasn't. It was more than half of a year, and Chamberlain was still leading the war effort, such as it was, even though it was only the Norway campaign, really. Britain and France didn't really do anything to try and help Poland. But then, so Norway is off the board, and then we're waiting, and nobody's really sure what's going to happen next. And then the next shoe drops in early April of 1940, when Germany invades Holland and Luxembourg and Denmark and Belgium. And they are very, very quickly, subdued within a matter of days or weeks. It's only then that Britain sends their army into France, because it becomes pretty clear that France is going to be invaded next. And France duly gets invaded, and France, I mean, they put up a better defense than they sometimes get credit for, but still, in the grand scheme of things, they pissed down their own leg and they got their ass kicked, and Britain got their ass kicked too. And we all know the story about Rommel overrunning everybody and outrunning his supply lines, and the French army and the British army are both on the run. The whole country of France is nearly subdued. They're pushed into a little pocket around Dunkirk, and then Hitler on 23 May issues the stop order. He tells everybody to just stop. Don't go an inch further. And the general perception is that, in historical hindsight, well, the Germans needed to rest. They had outrun their supply lines. Their tanks needed gas and maintenance. And sure, that's true to some extent, but there's another side to that coin, and the other side to it is that Hitler never really wanted to fight a war with Britain. He just wanted to subdue continental Europe. He already had Norway, so he could get the iron ore he needed, but he wanted to turn east and fight the Soviets and go smash communism, because that was his ultimate goal all along anyway. That was the thing he most wanted to do in his life. And so Britain was more of an annoyance than anything. And so there is a certain component of that stop order that's not just, we need to take time to stop and rest and refit and perform the maintenance that we need to perform on our tanks and our trucks and whatnot, but it's also, let's give the British a chance to sue for peace, because we don't want to have to invade Britain. We want to get rid of Britain. And also, we want to give Britain a chance to change their prime minister again, because this Churchill idiot, he just wants to fight until the end on the beaches and the landing grounds and so on. He wants to fight until the last man, but that's not what. That's going to be an expenditure of resources that we could much better use to go fight the Soviets and smash world communism once and for all. So it was thought, perhaps on the German side, that if we stop short here, if we give them a chance to reconsider things, then maybe they will reconsider. Maybe they'll change leadership. Maybe they'll put Halifax in the prime minister's spot. Halifax, of course, was the leader of the faction in the House of Commons that wanted to sue for peace and tell the Germans that, sure, you can have your territorial gains on the continent. We'll make a deal with you. Just let's meet halfway. Let's do something. But that is such a strategic hinge point, because what would have happened if that stop order is never issued? The British army is on the run. The French army is on the run. That is the entire professional corps of the British army, about 350,000 men. That,
right.
If all of those, go ahead.
If it had fallen at Dunkirk, if the events of Dunkirk had literally played out any other way, it would have been the end of English resistance to the Reich.
You've got no British army at that point. If all of those men are killed or taken prisoner, then there's nothing left. You've got,
but to sue for peace, that would be their only option.
Yeah, and of course, everybody alive today is still living in the post-World War II age, and even when our grandchildren are old people, they will still be living in the post-World War II age. Although, as the decades go on, I think the two world wars will start to be seen less as two distinct wars and more as one 30-year-long war with a 20-year interbellum period in the middle of it. But how much different would that look if the British army had been smashed on the beaches of Dunkirk, as it very well could have been, if that stop order was never issued? And there is also, go ahead.
If that stop order hadn't come and there had, if I mean, quite frankly, they were shooting fish in a barrel. They could have quite literally just wiped them out. They could have rolled right over them. They had panzers. There might have been a handful of tigers over there by then. Yeah, no, and they were all hopped up on amphetamines and stuff. So there's no.
They were. So it's not like they couldn't have kept going if they had been instructed to keep going, because just fill them up with more speed.
Another point. This shows you the amount of control that the Reich commanders were able to exert on the European theater in the early days of the war. Later, that wouldn't have happened. The SS would have rolled right in there and executed every single one of those Englishmen.
Right. That's a good point, because the Waffen SS doesn't even exist yet at this point.
Exactly.
Yep. But how differently does the rest of that war look if you smash the British Army at Dunkirk, and then they have to sue for peace? So obviously Germany is going to become the master of continental Europe, and
which
then
completely eliminates both Scotland and Ireland out of the fight entirely, because suddenly U-boats are everywhere in the North Sea. Scandinavia loses their naval support from everywhere else in the world. You end up with like all of the Scandinavian, Norway, all of those would fall quickly. Although I will hold out specifically for like Scandinavia. They had some really nasty guys over there that were doing some really nasty things to the Germans.
Well, and the perhaps the biggest complicating factor is, if that goes differently, then there's never any reason for the United States to become involved in the European war.
Right. And then you go forward, say 25 years, you have Fortress Europa actually established. You have an aging Hitler who overdoses on his various medications, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? And you have Mussolini over there, who of course ends up having exactly what happened to him happen, except instead of there being an election after the fact, Hitler just takes over as autocrat of Mussolini's his metaphorical heir, as it was. Hello, I'm Zaxxon. Yeah, no, it's a very different world front. You have a standoff between Red Communist Russia, Stalinist Russia, and then you have like the Third Reich standing right there in their teeth. The U.S., I don't think, is going to rise to the point of being a threat. If that whole Japanese issue wasn't a problem, I don't think we would even get involved.
No, and then if Germany doesn't wind up having to expend all the resources and men and airplanes that they expended, ultimately in a cause of futility, trying to in the bombing of, in the Blitz and the Battle of Britain and all that, then they are a much more capable and stronger force when they turn eastward, which probably happens much earlier, and try to subdue the Soviets.
That's a Spring 43 advance on Spring 42 advance on Soviet territory instead of Spring 44.
Well, in the event, it was June of 41, Operation Barbarossa begins, because Hitler just gets bored with the Battle of Britain, and he's tired of, he doesn't feel like we're getting any closer to being able to stage an invasion, and we're bombing them, and it's not doing anything to dampen their resolve. The other thing is, when, during the Battle of Britain, when a British pilot gets shot down, he can be back in a new airplane and back in the air a couple hours later. A German pilot gets shot down and he's a prisoner for the rest of the war. So you got to train up a replacement for him. And that calculus starts really, really degrading their ability as an air force, the Germans. And it starts really becoming apparent in the next couple of years as they're trying to assist their ground forces in Stalingrad and at Kursk and at Leningrad and in all of those battles that the Germans might have been able to win with a fitter air force. And in the event, because their capabilities had been degraded so badly in the futile cause of the Battle of Britain that they were not able to, and then, you know, all of these things contribute to the larger tide turning, and then
well, there's a lot more there than you can like put down to paper if you sit down and try to work it out. You have the planes that weren't lost, the pilots that weren't lost, the fuels that wasn't expended. You have taken Dunkirk. You have the entire English military, and now you have the entire world's shipping capability. You're no longer hunting English vessels with your submarines. You're now hunting anything else.
Right.
And
Exactly.
That's like a third or a third of the boats afoot on the sea at the time were English, or at least registered in England.
Yeah. And how many more ships and U-boats can you manufacture if your shipbuilding sites aren't being harassed by RAF bombers night and day?
Right. And you go a step further. You have the entire bog down through all of Cherbourg and the Battle of the Bulge, and all of that takes place in the Eastern Theater. The Western Theater. When you move all of that men and material, all of the tanks that they didn't lose at D-Day, all of the 88s, the MG-42s, the crews that run them, the vehicles that make it possible to supply them. If all of that stuff makes it to Russia, they took Moscow by spring. Stalingrad was fallen in the course of a couple of meth raids.
And it might have wound up being the same thing that played out when Napoleon took Moscow. Everybody just left and said, "Okay, take it. You'll have to leave eventually."
They burned it and left.
We'll just head back east and wait for you to get bored, and then we'll just pick you off one by one as you're trying to overstretch your supply lines and head back home. I mean, you know,
Well,
Russia has been able to play that waiting game with everybody who's ever tried to start a land war in Russia, which is where we get the saying, "Never start a land war in Russia."
Ever. It's like trying to influence politics in Africa. It is a wasted effort.
It sure as hell is.
I mean, it's just pointless. There is no consensus view anywhere in the universe as far as Africa is concerned. And likewise, any attempt to take Russia just results in Russians moving in the opposite direction for a while. Because if there's one advantage Russia possesses, it is unlimited amounts of territory into which you can retreat and just bide your time and wait out the situation. Yeah, wait until about December and come back, and you will just roll right over the top of them. They don't live there. That's the thing. Yep. Those alpine temperatures don't compete with Siberia.
No, especially when every adversary that tries to invade you invades in the summer and thinks that it'll be over well before winter, and they are always wrong.
So is it actually possible to cross all of Russia in a single summer? Without an airplane? I mean, like, could it be?
I think one would be hard pressed to I mean, in with an army, no, I don't think it can be done.
I don't see. I mean, there's a lot there. You're not just walking in and kicking out the Russians. I don't care how hard you try. There's just too damn many of them, and they're not. It's like trying to kick out the Alaskans. You're going to have to find them. Good luck.
Yeah, and then you see that when you read the letters that the German troops sent home. It's like we just keep killing them and killing them and killing them, and there's more and more of them. And when does it stop? They've just got unlimited reason. How many did Russia lose in the war? 20 million in total, and they still won. It was the biggest body count that any country has ever suffered in any war, and they still won.
My favorite story of all of that, and it comes from some of the Russians who held out on the west side of the river in Stalingrad. You know, that town completely fell. The Germans crossed the river. They rolled right through Stalingrad like they owned the place. And then they found the end of the rail line. And where the end of the rail line was 2 million Russians standing around with freaking pistols and rifles and just randomly shooting anything that freaking moved or smelled vaguely of sauerkraut.
Yep, and then the German strategy became, oh, it'll be all right. We can just the Luftwaffe can drop supplies into our army and they'll be okay. But there you get into the Battle of Britain again, because they were so degraded by that. All the planes and all the pilots they lost degraded their ability to supply their people in Stalingrad when they most needed it.
Exactly. And I propose that a well-rested and frontal deployed Air Force would have given them the air cover they need to roll through Stalingrad like a short stop. The additional fuel and just general munitions capacity that would have been available on the Eastern Front would have made like I said, they would have rolled through Moscow before winter. I'm not sure it would have made a long-term difference, really, because like you said, they would have just retreated back to
they would have let them take it, because what do we care?
Yeah, it's just land. We got more.
Yep, we let Napoleon take it, and look what happened to Napoleon.
Well, there is a bit of a difference here. And I'm not sure I don't believe there is a chance of a historical ruling of any significant portion of Russia. I just don't think the Russians themselves would have stood for it. I mean, I don't see a German hierarchy there. Partially, I'm saying
no, and really all the Germans wanted from the Soviet Union, they wanted Ukraine for the grain, and they wanted Azerbaijan for the oil fields, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Because if you give them those two things, then they have the resources to maintain their status as the master of Western continental Europe, and that's and combine that with the iron ore that you're getting from Sweden through Norway, which you also control. And then Bob's your uncle. You've got it made. They would still be the master of Europe today.
Suddenly you have tin, copper, and coal from England. Not to mention minerals from...
And you've got a peace deal with England, and you're getting resources from them too. So you raise an excellent point.
And that gives the Germans access to virtually every single port, deep water harbor in the world.
Oh, yeah. Everyone that matters. Yep, and it all could have played out that way if that stop order never happens, and
right.
If they just smashed the British Army on the Dunkirk beaches when they had the chance, and what a drastically different world we might be living in today. Because I mean, as it turns out, the status quo today is as things have played out, the German chancellor today is pretty much the master of Europe, but it has come about by distinctly different means.
I'm going to say the wrong thing on that topic.
Go ahead.
No, this is both our channels, bro. You got a monetization to consider. Love you, bro. I'm not taking you out like that.
They're not watching this in Brussels, are they?
See, man, we all got FBI guys, and you know how our FBI guys get with their FBI guys, and they all powwow and palaver and everything.
All right, well, why don't we just leave it there with Europe, and you do your next thing, and then we'll come back and do the Pacific.
All right, bud. That's a pretty good thing. Let me drop that tidbit down. Let me fix the shenanigans over here. We're gonna go with that one. Yep. Next time, I'm going to get this stuff put in the right order. We're actually going to talk about stuff before we start, and we'll have a plan. Instead, we just hung out and drank together. We didn't say a word about the show.
It's episode 2. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're making some headway here. Are you how familiar are you with Mr. Reagan?
I would say nominally, not intimately.
Okay, so I spent a year watching him thinking that he was full-on controlled opposition. And because, Sebastian Gorka, I mean, really, I'm just saying a full-on YouTube plant thing. I mean, he lives in an upscale LA apartment. He does his streams out of his balcony. That's not green screen. Cracker lives there. I hate him for that one reason alone, because his view's better than mine. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I really like his videos, and he did
a lot of my view too.
Right? I mean, who's this asshole? You look how attractive this man is. That is unconscionable. Why does he get the high top LA apartment and the stunning good looks?
Well, he still has to live in LA.
Okay, all right. You got me there.
FBI informants exposed.
Mr. Reagan.
Don't forget to buy my t-shirts and mugs.
Yeah,
They
go help
are
him
the
out.
best
Cool.
designed Trump mugshot mugs.
He's got all the Trump mugshot merch. Look at that.
Mugshot one. Just
beautiful.
get one of my regular Mr. Reagan things. You can support the channel and look awesome at the same time. All right, let's get going.
I had to have Lady Curmudgeon make my Trump mugshot shirt.
According to this article, Stephen D'Antuono, I believe you pronounce his name that way, the man who was previously in charge of the Bureau's Washington field office, has spilled the beans behind closed doors to the House Judiciary Committee. He's let the cat out of the bag. He's the fat lady, and he is singing. That is the wrong metaphor, but you get the idea. Anyway, I'm going to read this explosive article in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something.
And we're going to listen to his damn
has
commercial
lost 85%
because
of its value since the
it's Mr.
1970s
Reagan.
when the dollar decoupled from gold. And the government seems bent on
And he's right.
continuing this tradition. From now until the next election, the government can print as much money as they want. The last time they did that, inflation went up 9%. This means one thing: the security of your future and your family's future, it's all in your hands. Make sure you freeze the value of the wealth that you are holding. Invest in gold with Noble Gold Investments. Gold is the one asset that is proven to withstand recession, inflation, and just about all economic threats. Noble Gold Investments is here to help you if you want to invest in gold. You will also get a 24 karat 1/4 ounce gold standard coin for free. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com right now, noblegoldinvestments.com, or simply call 1-877-646-5347, the only gold company that I trust.
All right, so this article is headline.
all right. So for everybody who needs a footnote on how to sell out, there you go.
Seriously.
That's how you sell out with class, style, and pizzazz.
And the FBI lost count of how many paid informants were at the Capitol on January 6th and later performed an audit to figure out the exact number, says an ex-official. The FBI had so many paid informants at the Capitol on January 6, 2021 that it lost track of the number and had to perform a later audit to determine exactly how many confidential human sources run by different FBI field offices were present that day. A former...
All right. Let me repeat that for you, just for the people in the back that weren't paying attention. The FBI had so many unnoted, that's undercover assets, that's confidential human informants who would be dressed like any other person walking around out there trying to pretend to be normal sheeple. So many human assets in play on January 6th that after all of the shenanigans, they had to go back and do a multiple field office audit to determine who all was there and who was doing what, and they then redacted all of it.
And to put the exclamation point on that remark, the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Tuesday of this week that he does not know whether and how many FBI assets were present at the Capitol that day. And he said it with a straight face.
Absolutely. And I fully believe that he has no clue. He is so completely disconnected from what his agency is doing.
I mean, whether he's lying or clueless, I mean, does it make much of a difference either way?
Yes, because if he was lying outright and he was perfectly aware of what's going on, this implies a much more in-depth and planned out micromanaged attack on our democracy.
Because that's a pretty shocking thing for the Attorney General not to know 2.5 years later.
From a perspective of an interior coup, that's exactly what that looks like. When you take your opposition and you put your instigators into it dressed as your opposition, this is how coups happen. This is exactly the way this is done.
And we've got videos from that day. You've seen the videos where these guys are standing around in a group, you know, dressed up like they're trying to look like Trump supporters, and they couldn't look more like obvious feds if they were trying to dress up like obvious feds. It's absolutely freaking ridiculous.
Absolutely. All right. So he goes into some detail on some of this, and I was going to do a script on this whole thing, but then I stumbled across that and was like, shit, he's already said it all.
Assistant director of the Bureau has told lawmakers at least one informant was communicating with his FBI handler as he entered the Capitol, according to Stephen D'Antuono, formerly in charge of the Bureau's Washington field office. D'Antuono has testified behind closed doors to the House Judiciary Committee that his office was aware before the riot that some of their informants would attend the Stop the Steal rally thrown by former President Donald Trump, but he only learned after the fact that the informants run by other field offices also were present, along with others who had participated of their own accord. The Washington field office had to ask FBI headquarters to do a poll or about something to people saying, were any CHSs involved, confidential human sources, he said, so that they could get a handle on the scale of the FBI's spying operations on the Capitol that day. We started getting responses back from FBI headquarters, added D'Antuono, which helped identify which field offices had planted confidential informants in the crowd. One paid informant from the Kansas City field office was at the Capitol as the crowd surged inside and allegedly was in communication with his FBI handler while they were in the crowd, I think, saying that they were going in, according to the former Bureau brass. They were trying to stop some of the action happening, and they left or whatnot. Trying to stop some of the action happening.
Now, this is an official report from official sources in the FBI reporting to their superiors on docket or whatnot. So have you ever had a job where the words or whatnot would be accepted on any form you ever filled out, ever in the history of your work history?
I'm not a government employee, but no, I have not.
Right. I'm just not sure that's going to fly if you're going to turn that form into me. I'm going to ask exactly what that whatnot might be. That's just me. What do I know?
Think that sounds like BS to me. That sounds like he just made that up on the spot to try to make the confidential informants look like they were the good guys, when in reality they were probably agents
instigating the goddamn thing.
Probably agitators. Let's keep going. Asked how many informants the audit discovered were in the crowd that day, D'Antuono would only say a handful.
An observation. Had people in the crowd, had there been any other organization in America with as many people in the crowd as the FBI that day, it would have been an insurgency. But the only other organization that was there in the numbers of the FBI, the DC police, and in normal everyday gear, we're talking undercover people, were MAGA Trump supporters. Were the actual individuals there to see Trump and to support this whole process, right? That would be the video. What?
I did a video on January 7th, the day after this thing, where I said there is something about this that just looks really, really stage managed. Like this whole thing was engineered to produce exactly the kind of visuals that were in fact produced. And 2.5 years later, I have seen nothing that makes me reconsider my initial judgments on it.
Gretchen Whitmer. Do you remember the Gretchen Whitmer plot?
Yep.
There were, as if I remember right, and I may have my numbers wrong, there were 5 FBI agents from 3 different field offices working on 2 informants, one of which turned out to be another undercover FBI agent, but the entire plot had apparently been planned by FBI agents and executed by a slightly deranged, subpar mental individual.
Yeah. Yeah,
so is that entrapment?
The whole thing originated as an entrapment project. Let's hatch this thing and see how many idiots we can get to take part in it. And that's not how law enforcement is supposed to work.
But no, it worked like a charm. They got a whole pile
of course, yeah, it did.
It got a whole bunch of idiots all in a pile. They were all in the same FBI surveillance van.
Yep.
Look, the truth is, we've actually known about this for years. I made several videos about the fake protesters in the crowd.
They are trying to burn down our Capitol, and I did not come here for that.
Let's take a second here. Let's take a look at this gentleman. Now, I am merely judging on his arrangements of clothing. My man is wearing tactical fist gloves.
With khakis.
Those are not khakis. That
They're
is
not
a
khakis?
pair, I don't think that's khakis. I think that's like a pair of well, no, I guess there is a zipper, so it probably is khakis. Jesus Christ, it's almost a Fed starter kit. He does not appear
Right?
to have a watch, but his sleeve is pulled down. He is wearing brand new everything. There is not a smudge, not a scuff, not nothing on a single shoe, on his pants, even his gloves are absolutely spotless. His
And
shirt has not
look at his posture, the way he's carrying himself.
The only thing that tells me this person might not be DC police or might not be federale is his scraggly ass beard that I'm sure they chose him, and the fact that he's 4'1", right? If he's 2 steps up and the guy with the camera is looking down at him, this dude's 5'2", and doesn't meet the criteria to be an actual cop. So they've got him in the informer's racket. Look at him. All right, hypothetically speaking, if I was a drug dealer and that man walked into my house, not only is he immediately tossed out on his ass with whoever it was that brought him in, but I also just moved.
And I think that's what they do with a lot of guys who really, really badly want to be federal law enforcement, but don't qualify because they don't meet, one of the various minimum criteria, and they get rejected. And then you could be a confidential human source. Wouldn't you like that? We'll pay you really well. You just gotta go here and do this thing and dress up in this costume. And wouldn't that be great? You could still help us get the bad guys. Wouldn't that be awesome?
And I have a story that I heard. This is an anecdotal thing. This is something I heard that someone told me while they were really freaking hammered one night. But according to this dude, they have a place at Quantico where they bring confidential human sources to participate in the FBI program to sort of brain haze them into thinking that they're actually working for the FBI. When they're
it's just like you're an agent. It's almost the same thing. You're one of us, buddy.
Yep. Exactly. That's the whole motif of this.
Just fill their head full of all that kind of shit.
It's a moron training camp. Exactly.
Yep.
And useful idiots. They bring them in. They bring them in by the busloads and just march them right through there in little 2-week courses where they go and learn how to speak Fed boy, and they get their little tactical starter kit with the watch and the dive.
And this is the exact kind of thing they're recruiting them for.
Exactly.
It ain't patriots up there anymore. If you go look, they look like Antifa. They don't look like me. They don't look like you guys. I see a lot of women. I see a lot of kids. Get your families home. Get out of here.
Now, these videos have been censored, shadow banned, and even deleted by YouTube, because I'm a conspiracy theorist or something. But look, now we have testimonial evidence confirming.
Hey, bro. I want to get some tinfoil hats to put on during our conspiracy theorizing, and we should each choose whatever style of hat we wish and go about acquiring it in whatever way we can, whether you make it or whatever. No, yes,
I'm willing to actually wear a tinfoil hat if it looks tasteful enough.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking tricorn.
Ooh, tricorn tinfoil. I like the sound of that. Yeah, yep. I could get behind that project real easy.
All right, stay tuned, folks. We might find out about it.
That this is absolutely true. We conservatives, we have been harassed by social media companies for so long. We've been targeted for shadow bans and censorship. We have been proved right once again. But we actually already had confirmation. It just wasn't this explicit. Almost 1 year ago, Director Wray was asked about this, and he revealed the truth very clearly by refusing to answer the question.
Director Wray, did the FBI have confidential human sources embedded within the January 6th protesters on January 6th of 2021?
Well, Congressman, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I have to be very careful about what I can say about when
Even
we are-
now, because that's what
May I-
you told us
may I
2 years
finish?
ago.
May I finish? About when we do and do not, and where we have and have not used confidential human sources. But to the extent that there's a suggestion, for example, that the FBI's confidential human sources or FBI employees in some way instigated or orchestrated January 6th, that's categorically false.
Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being open?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It
in
should
what
be
I
a
can
no. Can you not tell the American people, no, we did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol on
Gentleman's
January the
time has
6th?
expired.
You should not read anything into my decision
Ms.
not to share information.
Director Ray,
Confidential human
Gentleman's time has expired.
In short,
That douchebag can't even wipe the smug grin off his face when he's trying to lie.
don't believe your lying ears. I didn't just say that I'm not going to tell you. I said that I need to be careful telling
Oh, I
you.
need to be very careful how I answer that question.
Right?
So,
That was-
so that's a yes. That's a yes. Basically, there's no way around the fact that that's a goddamn yes.
that's such an unequivocal yes that he can't even. I mean, his body language states that it's an absurd question. Of course, we had confidential human sources on the ground, but I have no idea what they were doing.
And the smug, self-satisfied grin never leaves his face because he knows he's never going to face any consequences for his lying.
Unless, I mean, I'm going to reiterate something I said the other night when this whole lockdown thing took place and that super flu come rolling through and it started wiping out all the super boomer remover stuff was going on. I was thinking we might have a changing of the guards from the old dogs in Congress to a bunch of new blood popping in, and we would have some kind of a shakeup of the establishment and have a real like political discourse, and things were going to kind of even out across the kilt. No, that didn't happen at all. In fact, the very opposite of what they said to expect happened. All the old people are still in power, and they are choosing their successors politically.
Replacing Comey with Ray was not an upgrade. It was a lateral move at best.
But we do have light at the end of the tunnel, folks. There is a rainbow around this dark cloud, and that rainbow is the various cities in New York, and even a little bit of grumbling coming from Chicago, because they're starting to have to deal with some of the migrant problems that are rolling through the southern border, and they've just got a small, tiny taste of what's been going on in the desert Southwest for the past 20 years.
Yeah, you mean they're not all chanting "no hate, no fear, immigrants are welcome here" anymore? They have to face the consequences of their sanctuary policies, and they start reconsidering them. How about that?
Anytime a lowly Sasquatch has to raise himself up to the cultural imperative to raise money for the poor people of Martha's Vineyard due to their immigrant crisis, it's a banner day in America.
Yeah. Mass migration is great unless I have to deal with it in my community where I live as an elite, wealthy white liberal. That's not okay. I didn't sign up for that.
But you did. Not you.
Oh yeah, you sure did. Every time you put that crap in your social media profile, every time you posted that you love migrants and anybody who doesn't want all these migrants is a racist and a xenophobe, you signed up for it every time you said every single one of those damn things.
Right. Every time you cast a vote.
Yep.
Yeah, we're sorry. We can't be transparent with the American people about us targeting you and sending you to prison because, it would compromise our sources and methods and all that kind of nonsense. Look, Christopher Wray, you cannot target the American people, innocent people, and then hide behind some kind of bureaucratic red tape BS. I think Christopher Wray needs to go to prison. To be perfectly honest, that's what I think. And look, we don't even know how many other agencies were using confidential human sources, or what I would call agents provocateur, in the crowd. We don't know. We only know that there's FBI guys. These are the only people that we have confirmation of from this kind of evidence, this witness testimony. However, we do have body cam footage from a couple of police officers.
Help him up! Help him up! Help him up! Hold on, wait. Push him up. Push him up. Help me break it. Come on. Let's go. Leave it. We're in the fucking house.
And, you know, this is all sounding more and more like the Whitmer.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that or was that not a DC cop helping people up the scaffolds?
Yep. And then ushering them inside the building so the Capitol Police could give them a guided tour of the place, and so then they could then be arrested and charged with seditious conspiracy and sentenced to 20 years in prison.
Exactly. Let's turn this on its head. Let's look at it from the inverted perspective. Okay, let's say we're Capitol Police and we have no idea what's going on. We don't know if there's a grade or nothing. All we know is we were told to show up at 7:30 this morning. We showed up on time. We clocked in. We were given all of our gear and we went and stood outside the Capitol. And some people come out from inside that are apparently Trump supporters, and they're like, why y'all got the gates closed? They've got the other doors open. And then some people come from the other side, also from the inside, saying, hey, why have you got this closed? The other side's got the doors open. And so, not knowing any better, you just open the gates, let them in.
And who was the commander in chief of the Capitol Police on January 6, 2021? Nancy Pelosi.
Yep. And who was walking around with a documentarian team with a full set of cameras and some perfect freaking angles for trying to catch any type of shenanigans like that would come down? Except we have virtually no footage.
Who offered her the service? And who offered her the services of the National Guard? President Donald Trump did.
It was, yeah. That's
which she declined.
She said she didn't need it. She had enough people in the crowd. I mean, on the ground. I mean,
well, that might mess with our stage managed event that we're doing here.
Strict political theater.
Case all of those years ago. I believe that everybody that's currently convicted of crimes from the January 6th protest, these people were all victims of entrapment. And look, there's a much more important question here, a much bigger question. Were these operatives actually agitators, instigators, as I like to call them, agents provocateur? We know that Ray Epps was one, and we have called out the absurdity of the government hiding his
misdemeanor.
One single misdemeanor 2.5 years later.
Of what was it? Inciting excitement or something like that.
Just like the Hunter Biden gun charge.
Yep.
Provocateur status from the very start. Now, nobody knows for sure whether Ray Epps was working for the FBI or the CIA or the NSA or some other agency, whether it was for Hillary or Pelosi or the deep state or maybe even a third-party group or somebody else in conjunction with all these people. And we absolutely need that question answered. What we know is that he was an agitator. Clearly, he was working against Donald Trump, against the protesters that day, and against the American people in order to create the illusion of an insurrection so that Donald Trump would be prohibited from running for president ever again. What's funny is that because Epps was identified in public and called out, he has just been indicted on the weakest charge ever issued for any of the J6 protesters, a slap on the wrist, disorderly conduct charge in order to pretend that he has been charged just like every other January 6th protester. It is laughable. But look, the big question here is how many other Ray Eppses were there, and were any of the window breakers or any of those who scuffled with police or engaged in acts of vandalism or stole things, were any of them these agitators, were any of these people FBI guys? Because all of these relatively insignificant acts, these are the things that caused gullible Democrat voters to accept the term insurrection. And the term insurrection is what got Trump impeached and now indicted. And it's what they're trying to use as justification to keep him off the ballots in 2024. I mean, this was no insurrection, obviously. But if we can prove that it was FBI folks or agitators brought in from elsewhere who committed all these minor crimes, we could prove that it truly was a peaceful protest. And moreover, we could prove that any appearance of an insurrection was orchestrated by the FBI. Exactly what we've been speculating about for the past 2 years. This was a psyop. It was a psychological operation specifically designed to convince the American people that Donald Trump incited an insurrection. And it was done specifically to prohibit him from running for president ever again in America. And now we finally have some concrete witness testimony confirming this. Hopefully, the truth about that day will soon be fully exposed, and we can hold the perpetrators of this PSYOP accountable. But then again, I'm not holding my breath. Okay, now go buy my t-shirts. Go buy my mugs. The link for these things is in the description below. Until next time, remember, it's not that all liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
And that, folks, is Mr. Reagan.
Anybody who's watched my channel for any length of time knows my views on the FBI already. The FBI has been a rogue agency for over 90 years now. Ever since it first originated, it began as a monument to the ego of a cross-dressing psychopath homosexual. It has never had any compunction about trying to destroy presidents it didn't like. It has never been a straight and narrow law enforcement agency, and it has to go. It has to be got rid of. Period.
I don't think you've been able to call the FBI straight since J. Edgar Hoover, son.
Never, ever, ever. The FBI is crooked and rotten to its core, and that's why it remains crooked and rotten to its core, because it has a culture of corruption and crookedness and rottenness, and it can't be reformed. People say they want to reform the thing. How do you reform the thing when there's nothing to reform back to? When it was always this? What are you going to reform? It has to go. It has to be broken up and the pieces scattered to the four winds. You can take all of its essential functions and roll them into other agencies in the federal bureaucracy. No, Lord knows we have enough of those.
Right. All right. So I got hit with a pitch from a channel that no longer exists one time, and it kind of shattered the way I thought about things. You know, when you think about government, a lot of times you think about these big three-letter institutions as being permanent features of the landscape that you just have to deal with.
Yep.
But the same mechanisms that brought them into being can completely eliminate their funding.
They sure can. And
so it is possible that we can completely say, I don't know. And this was the one that tickled me, because we can all agree, at least I think most of us can agree, that the ATF has overstepped their bounds in the federal government today, and that they are now interpreting law in their own right and have not that capability. And so there's
no good reason why the ATF needs to exist. Just there's no good reason why the Department of Education needs to exist. The Department of Education has done nothing but destroy the achievement of American school children.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's what he started with. He was like, we should abolish the Department of Education outright. How bad does that shake your worldview? And for a minute there, I didn't have a response for it because I had never considered the possibility. Just leaving it to the states. That's almost brilliant. You get 50 tries to get it right. And when somebody does, you can emulate that in other states.
And the whole central principle of the founding of our federal system was supposed to be that any function of government should be as close to the source as possible. Anything that can be done locally should be done locally. Anything that should be done that could be done at the county level should be done at the county level. Anything that can be done at the state level should be done at the state level. The central federal government should be limited to functions that only that government can do. But now we have an empirical, I would submit, tyrannical, nearly all-powerful central government that is a fixture of the daily life of every American, and that is completely contrary to what our founders envisaged.
Fully agree, 100%. You got time to do your other bit?
We're at the hour-and-a-half mark here. I would rather save it for next week, if I'm being honest.
All right, bud.
But I was glad to go through that Mr. Reagan thing. I think that was useful and productive.
Yeah, I dig that. I really. Now, he's political. He's a pundit. He's opinionated, and that's all well and good. I don't have an issue with that. His leaning on historical rhetoric is one of the things I really like. He doesn't tend to misquote quotes like a lot of people do, which implies that he's at least read the sources of those quotes.
And that's something I try to do too. I try to, when I'm talking about things in the current day, I try to talk about the historical antecedents, because there always are historical antecedents to the things that are happening in the present day. And once you've been alive long enough to see these same cycles play out, once or twice or three times or four times, you have the experience and the wisdom to see that. And you should share that with other people as widely as you possibly can.
Agreed. So in conclusion, we're gonna pretty much end this whole shindig right about 30 seconds from now. But in conclusion, the destruction of Western civilization has been brought about from an internal turmoil, through an internal turmoil that is the result of balkanization processes utilized by American federal organizations to destabilize other countries for the past 40 years. And it appears as though these same PSYOP techniques have been turned directly onto the American public.
And by the corporate entities that exercise an outsized influence upon those government institutions, and which just gets more and more and more pervasive as the years go on. Because there no longer are any dividing lines between corporate America and government and the media and academia. They are all just the same things. Those are all just power centers of basically the same institution, and that is a very, very serious problem.
It's the billionaires club. It's just like old school, good old boys club, except you're not in it.
Yeah, and the only thing that's changed is the people in the good old boys club learned to speak the language of the left, and now everybody on the left thinks they're just great, and because they're gullible fools. And I don't know what you do about that.
That's a very interesting thought. It had not occurred to me that they had just put on the sheepskin.
They just repurposed their rhetoric.
All right, so let's do the thing. You want to tell everybody bye? You want me to tell everybody bye, or did we just tell everybody bye?
I can tell everybody bye.
Do that thing, bro.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. We will see you next week. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.